Hello, my name is Matthew. I'm a strategic systems consultant at Quest. And in this video, I would like to talk to you about email and how it interacts with GPOADmin. So GPOADmin, being a governance-based system, often needs to communicate with the end users of GPOADmin. By that I mean, as a user of GPOADmin, if I need to request approval, and that approval lies with someone in perhaps a separate team, maybe someone geographically dispersed. Regardless, it's important for GPOADmin to be able to contact the person that needs to approve a change to let them know that there's a change that needs to be approved. In addition, there are a variety of things within GPOADmin that can be alerted on, that you can just simply get emails letting you know that something has happened that you might want to be aware of. So email within GPOADmin is set up within the options. Underneath notifications. So you can see there's two sections underneath notifications. There's SMTP and there's workflow. You can think of these kind of as outgoing and incoming. Outgoing email always is the first one to be set up. You can't set incoming email without outgoing. Outgoing email, we support three different, basically, sort of systems or platforms. We have basic, which is just your simple authenticated SMTP relay. This is not anonymous. It will either use the credentials of the service account that's running GPOADmin, or you can override credentials here. That can be set for SSL encryption, Exchange Online, and Office 365. So this uses a service principal based method of interacting directly with Exchange Online. And then finally, supports Gmail or G Suite for sending out email. We can go a step beyond that, though. So within GPOADmin, not only is it useful to be able to be alerted when you have an approval that you need to sort of analyze and approve or decline, but it's also useful to be able to process those approvals through email. So rather than having to go and launch the client, log in, find the object, right click on the object and either approve or reject the change, instead it's useful to be able to do that through email. And that is what workflow is. So workflow, within workflow, GPOADmin actually checks a mailbox on a periodic basis to see whether there is messages there that conform to the approval or rejection format. So if we take a look in Inbox, we can see an example here. Take a look in Outlook. We can see an example of what a fully integrated approval notification looks like. You can see that because this is a modification, it set out both a settings, which tells you, the settings of what's about to be deployed or what is requested to be deployed, as well as a difference because it's a modification. So you want to see the contrasting with the previously deployed state. And this email, if it's workflow enabled, adds two buttons down here, approve and reject. If I click on approve, it's going to create a specially crafted email message that goes to the mailbox that GPOADmin is going to periodically check. If there is a bunch of ID information within the subject, so it's be very difficult to actually to tamper with or otherwise fake. And then GPOADmin will check that message. I think it's every 2 to 3 minutes it checks those mailboxes. So that setup is here. Now, naturally, there's no, just SMTP because that's, an outgoing email protocol, not an incoming email protocol. But if we take a look, there's a section here for Exchange Online, and Office 365, where you can enable this approval, either choosing basic authentication, which is appropriate for Exchange on-prem, or certificate, or not certificate, but service principal based authentication for Exchange Online and Office 365. This, by the way, I'm recording this video as of GPOADmin version 5.16. 5.17 is going to change the API that GPOADmin uses to communicate with Exchange Online. This will allow it to use certificate-based authentication for one, but more importantly, it will also allow further restrictions of what the actual permissions requirements are for that service principal. Similarly, for G Suite and Gmail, we can also enable workflow approval through email. A couple other just really quick topics on this. When it comes to approvals, this is one of the things that when I first started working with GPOADmin, it kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. So in the Approvals tab, you can see in this example, I just have my administrative account specified directly, but let's say, for instance, that I do as most customers would and set up a group. So this group is when GPOADmin goes to email the members of this group. You might expect that it would, look and enumerate the membership of that group, find the email addresses associated with those members, and then email each of those directly. But that's not what GPOADmin does. GPOADmin instead looks for this group to be email enabled itself and sends out a single approval message to this group. So this means that you can either choose to use a distribution group here or a mail-enabled security group. That it does at the end of the day work quite well. However, that is just kind of an aspect of what it does that might be a bit confusing when you're trying to set this up. Another quick thing when it comes to email approvals, emailing in general, is how to configure notifications. So notifications are, again, those are outside of the approval system. Approvals will always send out email messages, but you may wish to simply be notified on certain circumstances within GPOADmin, and that can be done in two ways. As an end user, if I have the rights through a role to do this, I can go into any container or any GPO itself, go to Properties, and click on the Notifications tab here and say, all right, well, I want to be notified if there's an unauthorized modification made to this, to any object within this container, or it's moved, or security is modified. Basically, any of the things that you can that GPOADmin can do, you can pretty much be notified on. This is an interesting one, though, right here, request approval. And for beginning users of GPOADmin, this can often trip people up. For request approval, if you select this and you're on the approval list, you'll get 2 emails. So request approval, this is only if you are not on the approval list, but would still like to know if there's an approval that's been requested. Again, this is driven as an end user. As an administrator, I can also define who gets notified as what. So this is really useful to kind of set up sort of more administrative controls around notification. Here I can select any of the containers and add subscribers and basically sort of push that out. So you can do things like, all right, well, what I'll do is have a, just like a group that I want to get notified on unauthorized modifications for a set of containers. And rather than telling people like, hey, you need to go and subscribe to this because you're responsible for dealing with these, instead, we can just sort of assign that notification as an administrator, and they'll just simply get notified on that. All right, one last little bit of an errata that I personally have run into that would be useful for anyone listening to this video to know. It's not uncommon in larger production environments of GPOADmin to have multiple GPOADmin servers. GPOADmin supports this just fine. It's why I often refer to a GPOADmin instance, because again, you can have multiple servers. You can even have multiple SQL servers that are replicating with each other for completely independent instances. All that to say, though, is you have to be a little bit careful when designing your email integration if you have multiple GPOADmin instances, because the server settings that we just looked at under options are a per server setting. And it's important that if you want full email integration, you have two, like if you have two GPOADmin servers, you need two mailboxes. Because otherwise, what can happen is if you have two servers checking the same mailbox, they're not coordinating with each other to see who needs to be working on something. So one might check it, they'll check the email, they'll basically be like, okay, I read this, it gets marked as read, but they don't consider themselves responsible for actually dealing with the change because they didn't send out that notification. So they'll just kind of ignore it. And then you'll essentially have email workflow approvals that don't work consistently. So the solution is really simple. You can just simply set up multiple GPOADmin mailboxes for your multiple GPOADmin servers. One last technical item. This has been a relatively recent addition into GPOADmin, but if we look under options in general, you'll notice here that there's a setting. And that setting is, let's see, where is that? Actually, apologies. I think that might be actually under notifications itself. Yes, apologies there. But there's a setting called Enforce Approver Account Validation. Enforce Approver Account Validation is basically a way for GPOADmin to recognize if someone has forwarded on an approval request. Basically, it says, all right, well, I know who was a member of the group that I sent out messages to for approval. Let's make sure that if I get an approval message back, that it's one of those members. If someone hasn't sent that out and forwarded to someone, or someone hasn't looked at the mailbox and approved it. I include this not only just to make people aware that this is there, but also this is a feature that can be a little technically interesting to implement. In as much as my understanding is that with the upcoming Exchange Online new API, if you restrict GPOADmin to only being able to check its own mailboxes, it's actually unable to enforce this approver account validation. So definitely, if you're looking to implement this, make sure that you're familiar with sort of the ins and outs of where it works and where it doesn't work. Well, thank you.